think that little clip explained it all. Mako T-Pod, it's a vertical foregrip and a bipod. There you go. My particular T-Pod here, this is the Gen 1. It's a kind of a big chunky grip. The newer one, the Gen 2, has finger grooves cut into the front of it, and it seems to be a little bit slimmer. They both function the same way. They both have versions like this one that are just the foregrip and the bipod, but there is a version both in Gen 1 and Gen 2 where you can hold a light up in the front of this. So it's a little bit larger and it has kind of a cutout so you can stick a Surefire light in it or whatever. And the Gen 2 also comes in a few different colors. Instead of just black, you can get like a tan and a green. Before I get too far into this review, I need to point out that this is not an actual Israeli FAB Defense Mako T-Pod. This is a Chinese knockoff. I thought that I had gotten a pretty good deal on this thing when I bought it. Turns out it was a good deal. It was too good to be true. This is kind of a black market, gray market version, and you can tell by these little molding, these little circles here on the plastic. If yours has this, then yours is fake, and it's not made of the good stuff. This is not as tough as the real, I think it's a fiberglass reinforced plastic when you get the actual Israeli one, and this Chinese one, even though it says Israel on it, yeah, this one is not very tough. It kind of breaks apart, and I'll show you that here in a bit. Despite this being a knockoff that doesn't work as well as the original, I can still discuss the design, because even though this is made of pretty bad stuff, it does still use the same design. It uses the same features as the original, and those are some of the things that I kind of have some problems with. So we'll take a look at that. All right, let's take a look at some of the good aspects of this T-Pod first. And the big one here is weight. At 12 1/4 ounces, this is definitely heavier than any foregrip you're going to find out there. But remember that you're getting a bipod in the deal too. And there really is no combination of a separate vertical foregrip and bipod that's going to weigh as little as this does altogether. And if you throw in the fact that you can mount this really far back on the Picatinny rail, then that means that you're putting the weight of all this pretty far back where you want it, instead of sticking it out into the muzzle of the gun. If you had a separate bipod, you probably have to mount it toward the front of the Picatinny rail. And so you're putting extra weight out where you really don't want it. And also attached to this, you get a lot of space savings. You can see that I have this attached, and with the foregrip and bipod, you still get plenty of rail left if you want to mount a light or anything like that. Some other good aspects: it is a big chunky grip, so if you have larger hands or kind of hollow hands, it's going to fill it up quite nicely. It has 2 pressure switch slots, and you can see here this little plastic tab, and if I just pull down on that, that pops out, this little plastic piece here, and you can mount your pressure switch. You can glue it in place, or what I did is I put a little Velcro wrap around it, and the bipod was still able to close. That worked pretty well for me. And so you get one of these on each side. The bipod is very easy to deploy. If you're in the foregrip configuration, all you have to do is just press these 2 side-by-side buttons and then pop. The legs come out to their fullest extent. While we're on the subject of the bipod height, I'd like to really illustrate that this is a perfect height for an AR15 bipod. You can see here that it's balancing on the bipod legs and on the end of the buttstock. And you might not be able to see this, but the magazine and the rear grip are just not touching the ground. So if I go into a firing position here where, say, my shoulder's in here, you can see that there's plenty of room. I'm really not going to interact with the ground or rocks or anything like that unless they're really jutting up. Also on the height, it's very easy to make adjustments. You see that there are some numbers here, and if you want to lock into a new spot, you want to level the gun out, maybe you have some cant going on, you just press the button on the back, and then you can slide down to the next detent. And it's spring loaded, so if you want to go back up, you just press and then pop back out. The feet are rubber, and they get a pretty good connection to the ground, but the whole thing has some slop in it. It has some flex, and this is something that I actually don't mind. If I'm doing varmint shooting out in the prairie or whatever, if I'm shooting prairie dogs, then I want this thing to flex a little bit as the prairie dog moves. I like to get a little bit of pivot, so I really don't mind that. Let's take a look at some of the drawbacks of the T-Pod. First off, you can see that when it's fully stowed, this is about as tall as a 30-round magazine in the AR15. So if you have difficulty getting your AR into a case with a magazine in place, you're going to have the same problem with the Foregrip. Now, to be fair, there are some reasons for this. You have to have this great big pivot in the base here, and you have to have enough room for the bipod to fit inside this grip. So the grip is itself, just this part, is taller than most that you'll encounter. But it kind of has to be that way for the bipod. Another kind of odd thing about the base here, it does take up quite a few rails. Again, it's a savings overall if you were to have a foregrip and a bipod, where it might take up everything on the bottom. But it is quite large, and when it comes to attaching it, it's not the easiest thing in the world. You have this button on the side that you can push so that you can slide this thing on and off, which sounds great. It's not quite a quick detach though. I've actually hurt myself pretty good trying to get this thing on and off, where you press this button just right, try to slide it, it suddenly goes, and your hand is shredded on your own Picatinny little rails there. So that was fun. If you want to install it more permanently, there is a bolt that comes with it that you can run through here, and that's going to attach it pretty well. One big problem that I think is just down to the cheap Chinese manufacturer of this knockoff model is you can see here that every time these legs deploy, it breaks just a little bit more plastic out of this rail. So eventually this leg will just crack right through, fly off, and I'll never see it again, which is one of the reasons why I don't carry this anymore. But the bigger reason is what's coming up next. Like me, you're probably pretty impressed with how well this thing deploys, but it doesn't stow quite so easily. It actually requires two hands. You have to use one hand to bring the two legs together, and then your second hand has to come up to press the two buttons, and then you have to press everything down until it all clicks together. Now, that sounds kind of easy, but if you were on a hill or for some reason one of these legs was a little shorter than the other, then it no longer stows at all. You can't connect the two sides. So you have to first extend the legs until they're the same, bring them together, and then do the whole thing. So, not super easy. The T-Pod will set you back about $120, so that puts it in pretty much the same price range as the Grip Pod. The Grip Pod really isn't in the same league, even though they seem to do the same sort of thing. They're both a foregrip, they both have a bipod that pops out, but really this thing it's much more flexible. You can adjust for cant if you're on a weird surface. Overall, I think I would prefer this. The Grip Pod might be a little tougher, it's definitely simpler, so it's definitely a competition to check out. Another competitor might be the D-Grip from UTG. That thing just came out, and it looks like it does pretty much the same thing as the T-Pod here. It's, I'm sure, going to have a much lower price tag, and it might not be as tough as the Grip Pod or tough as this, but it does have a quick release lever on this side, and that's kind of sweet. One of the reasons I don't use my T-Pod anymore is because I've replaced it with this, the Magpul angled foregrip. When I was using this exclusively, I had two ways that I could hold this and shoot while standing. I could grab the grip here, which puts my hand very much off the bore axis, or I could kind of grab up at the top of it, get my thumb up around the bore axis, and that just makes recoil a little easier to manage between shots. This, which is super lightweight, kind of replaces all of that. And with a lightweight bipod up front, yeah, it's not optimal. There's still some things that I prefer about this, but for now, I'm preferring this method. Now, a product that I'd be very interested in is if someone could take an angled foregrip like this, and somehow make it so it could transform into a bipod, that would be pretty sweet. I'd buy that.